14 of Bobbsey Twins on a Houseboat. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Bobbsey Twins on a Houseboat by Laura Lee Hope. Chapter 14. Off Again. "What are we going to do?" asked Mrs. Bobbsey as she stood at the side of her husband on the deck of the houseboat. Mr. Bobbsey was looking at the wire fence as though trying to find a way to get past it, either under it or over it, or to one side or the other of it. Of course, he did not think it wise to try little Freddie's plan of breaking the wire with a cutter thing such as the telephone men carried. "Well," said Mr. Bobbsey, after a bit, "I guess the only thing for us to do is to go back until we are anchored in some part of Lemby Creek that doesn't belong to Mr. Hardee." "Does he really own this water?" asked Bert. "Well, he says so, and I have no doubt but what he does," said Mr. Bobbsey. "If he owns land on both sides of the creek, naturally he owns the creek too." "And we can't go up or down it?" asked Mrs. Bobbsey. "Not unless he lets us." "What about the fishes?" asked Bert. "He can't stop them from swimming up and down." "No, he can't do that," agreed his father with a smile. "Then can he stop Harry and me from catching fish?" Bert wanted next to know. "Not if you fish somewhere else than in his waters," spoke the twins' father. "The best thing for us to do is to get back where we were at first, near where the creek runs into Lake Metoka. There we can anchor for a time." "But how are we going to get to Lake Romano?" asked Nan. "I want to show Dorothy the big waterfall." "Well, perhaps we can get there a little later," her father said. "Just now Mr. Hardee has the best of us, and we'll have to do as he says. So, Captain White, I guess we'll have to back up the boat, as we can't go past the fence." "If I had one of those wire cutter things," began Freddie, "I could snip that wire as easy as anything." He seemed to think of nothing else. "Oh, you and Flossie had better go play with Snap or Snoop," suggested Bert with a laugh. "Or you can come and watch Harry and me fish. We are going to as soon as we get back a ways." "I'm going to fish too!" declared Freddie eagerly. The creek near Mr. Hardee's farm was so narrow that the houseboat could not be turned around in it, and it had to go backwards. This was easy, since the Bluebird was something like a ferry boat, built to go backward or forward. The twins were a little sad as they saw their boat backing up, but it could not be helped. "We'll have a good time fishing, anyhow," said Harry. "That's right," agreed Bert. "I wonder if that boy Will took his fishing rod with him. He would probably need it if he has run away and is going out west to find his uncle." "Why would he need a fish rod?" asked Nan. "To catch fish to eat," her brother said. "He'll have to have something, and fish are the easiest to get. I almost wish I had gone with him. It will be lots of fun." "Oh, but it will be very hard, too," said Mrs. Bobbsey. "Think of the lonely nights he will have to spend, and perhaps with no place to sleep but on the hard ground. And when it rains." "I guess I'll stay home," laughed Bert, as though he had ever had an idea of running away from home. Slowly the Bluebird made her way backward until she had passed some posts near the edge of the water. These posts marked the boundary line of Mr. Hardee's farm. He did not own beyond them, and Captain White said the creek was public property there. "Then we'll anchor here," decided Mr. Bobbsey, as he steered the houseboat toward the shore. "Then I think I will take a little trip back to Lakeport." "And leave us alone!" cried Mrs. Bobbsey. "Only for a short while. I want to see some friends of mine and find out if Mr. Hardee really has a right to put the fence off Lemby Creek. I don't believe he has." "Will you be back tonight?" "Oh, yes. It isn't far to Lakeport. I can walk across the fields and go by trolley." "I do hope you can find some way of getting past the fence," said Mrs. Bobbsey. "It would be too bad to have our trip spoiled." As Mr. Bobbsey was getting ready to go back to town, Dinah came out of the dining room, looking rather puzzled. "What is the matter?" asked Mrs. Bobbsey. "Are you worried because we can't get those eggs from Mr. Hardee?" "Well, yes'm, that's partly it," said the fat cook. "We's get the eggs and other things, too." "Bert and Harry can walk to the village," said Mr. Bobbsey. "It isn't far from here. I'll go part way with them, so don't worry, Dinah." Oh, that isn't all that's worrying me, Massa Bobbsey. But did you say the children should have the corn muffins what was left over? And she looked at Mrs. Bobbsey. The corn muffins that were left over? Repeated the twins' mother. No, I said nothing about them. And they know that they should not eat between meals without asking me. Why, are the muffins gone, Dinah? Yes, some of them. I put them on a plate on the dining room table, but now they're gone. Maybe Snap took them, suggested Mr. Bobbsey. Snoop wouldn't, for she doesn't like such things, but Snap is very fond of them. Freddie, who heard the talk, hurried over to where the dog was lying asleep in a patch of sunlight and opened his mouth. No, Snap didn't take them, said Freddie. There aren't any crumbs in his teeth. Well, maybe you can tell that way, but I doubt it, laughed Mr. Bobbsey. Perhaps you forgot where you put the muffins, Dinah, or maybe there were none left. Oh, I sure I'd put them on the table, said the fat cook. And I'm sure there was some left. I'll go look some more, though, as there were a few other things besides eggs that were needed for the kitchen of the houseboat. Bert and Harry planned to take a basket and go to the nearest village store for them. They would walk across the fields with Mr. Bobbsey. "We'll fish when we come back," said Bert, "and get enough for dinner and supper," added Harry. "Better get enough for one meal first," suggested Nan with a laugh. The houseboat was now made fast to the bank of the creek, some distance away from the wire fence Mr. Hardee had stretched across the stream. It was not to be seen, nor were the farm buildings. The last of the Bobbseys had observed of the farmer was as he stood near his wire fence, shaking his fist at the houseboat. Mr. Bobbsey did not just know how he was going to get past the fence with the Bluebird, or how he could get Mr. Hardee to cut the wire. The twins' father decided to ask the advice of some friends. Meanwhile, Bert and Harry had reached the store and had brought the eggs and other groceries back to Dinah. "Did you find the corn muffins?" asked Bert. "Because if you did, Harry and I would like some. May we have one, Mother?" "If Dinah has them, yes." "But I can't find them," complained the fat cook. "Them muffins am just done gone and hide themselves." "Oh, I guess we ate them up without knowing it," Bert said with a laugh. "Never mind, Dinah. A piece of cake or pie will do just as well." "Go along with you!" cried the cook with a laugh. "I've got something else to do except making cake and pies for two hungry boys. You just take a piece of bread and butter till Dinah is ready." "All right," agreed Bert. "It won't be long until 12 o'clock. Come on, Harry, and we'll see what luck we have fishing." "I'm ready," was Harry's answer. "I'll get you the bread and the butter," offered Nan, and she did, adding some jam to the bread, which was a delightful surprise to the two boys. "I want to fish too," said Freddie. "All right, I'll fix you a line," offered Bert. "But be careful you don't fall in. A fish might put you overboard." Soon the three boys were dangling the lines over the rail of the Bluebird, while Nan helped her mother with some of the rooms, which, even though they were on a boat, needed putting to rights. Dinah was busy in the kitchen. By this time Mr. Bobbsey had reached Lakeport by the trolley. He was going to his lumber office, thinking some of his friends, whom he might call on or telephone, could suggest a way out of the trouble. Before he reached the lumber yard, however, he made an acquaintance on the street, a Mr. Murphy. "Why, hello, Mr. Bobbsey!" exclaimed Mr. Murphy. "I thought you were off on a vacation with your family in a houseboat." "I was," said the lumber merchant, "but I came back." "Back so soon? Didn't you like it?" "Oh, yes, first rate. But we can't go any further." "Can't go any farther? What's the matter? Did your boat sink?" "No, but we are stuck in Lemby Creek. Mr. Hardee, a farmer who owns land on both sides of the creek, has put a wire fence across to stop us from going on to Lake Romano." "Is that so? Well, that's too bad. How did it happen?" "I'll tell you," said Mr. Bobbsey. Then he told the story of stopping the angry farmer from beating Will Watson, and how the fence had been built in the night. "Well, that certainly was a mean trick on the part of Mr. Hardee," said Mr. Murphy. "And so the boy ran away?" "Yes. And Mr. Hardee accused me of knowing something about him. But I don't, any more than you do." "I suppose not. But now the question is, how are you going to get past that wire fence?" "I don't know. The only way I see is to get Mr. Hardee to cut it, or take it down, and he says he won't do either. Let me see. There ought to be a way out of it. I believe he has some right, as far as the law goes, to put that fence up, but no one else would be so mean. I guess we'll just have to force him to cut those wires, as your little boy Freddie suggested." "Yes, but how can we do it?" asked Mr. Bobbsey. "Mr. Hardee is very headstrong and set in his ways." "Let me see," spoke Mr. Murphy slowly. "Isn't his name Jack Hardee?" Yes, I believe it is. And didn't he buy from you the lumber to build his house? Yes, I sold him the lumber, but he paid me for it, said Mr. Bobbsey. I couldn't get any hold on him that way. He paid me for the lumber in cash. Yes, cried Mr. Murphy, but he got the money from me to pay you, and he hasn't paid me back. He still owes me the money, and he gave me a mortgage on his house as security. I've got a hold on him all right. He owes me some interest money too. I might say to you little children that when a man wants to build a house and has not enough money, he goes to another man and borrows cash, just as your mamma sometimes borrows sugar or tea from the lady next door. When the man borrows money to build his house, he gives to the man who lends him the cash a piece of paper called a mortgage. That paper says that if the man who borrowed the money does not pay it back and also pay the interest for the use of it, the man who lent him the money can take the house. The house is security for the loaned money. It is just as if your mamma went next door to borrow a cup of sugar and said, "Now, Mrs. Jones, if I don't pay you back the sugar and a little more than you gave me for being so kind as to lend it to me, if I don't pay it back in a week, why you can keep my new Sunday hat." And your mamma might give Mrs. Jones a Sunday hat as security for the cup of sugar. Of course, ladies do not do these things, but that is what a mortgage is like. "Yes," said Mr. Murphy to Mr. Bobbsey. "Mr. Hardy borrowed from me the money to buy from you the lumber for his house, and he hasn't paid me back the money, nor any interest on it. I think I will go up and have a talk with him, and when I get through talking, I guess he will let you go through his wire fence." "I hope he will," said Mr. Bobbsey, "for it would be too bad to have our trip spoiled." "I will go right back with you," offered Mr. Murphy. So it happened that Mr. Bobbsey with his friend reached the houseboat in Lemby Creek shortly after dinner. "Oh, back so soon?" asked Mrs. Bobbsey. "What are you going to do, Mr. Murphy?" "Have a talk with Mr. Hardy." Mr. Bobbsey and Mr. Murphy walked down the bank of the creek to the farm. They found Mr. Hardy mending a broken harness. "Mr. Hardy," said Mr. Murphy, "I hear you have put a wire fence across Lemby Creek, so my friend Mr. Bobbsey can't get past with his houseboat." "Yes, I have," growled the farmer, "and that fence is going to stay up too. I'll show him he can't come around here interfering with me when I try to punish my help. He made Will run away too." "No, I did not. I know nothing of him," said Mr. Bobbsey. "Mr. Hardy," went on Mr. Murphy, "I want you to take down that fence and let the houseboat go on up the creek." "And I'm not going to." "Very well, then," said Mr. Murphy quietly. "Perhaps you are ready to pay me the interest on my mortgage, which has been due for some time, Mr. Hardy." The farmer seemed uneasy. "Well, to tell you the truth," he said, "I haven't got that money just now, Mr. Murphy. Times have been hard, and crops are poor, and I'm short of cash. Can't you wait a while? I have waited some time." "Well, I'd like to have you wait a little longer. I'll pay you after a while. And I suppose you'll take down that wire fence and let Mr. Bobbsey and the twins go past after a while?" "Well, maybe," growled the farmer. "Maybe won't do!" exclaimed Mr. Murphy. "I want you to take the wire fence down right away." "Well, I'm not going to do it. He interfered with me and made that boy run away, and I'm not going to let him go up my part of the creek." "Well, then, Mr. Hardy, if you can't do something for Mr. Bobbsey as a favor, I can't do anything to oblige you. Mr. Bobbsey is a friend of mine, and unless you cut your wire fence, I'll have to foreclose that mortgage and take your house in payment for the money you owe me. That's all there is about it. Either pay me my money or cut that fence. It must be one or the other." Mr. Hardy squirmed in his seat and seemed very uneasy. "I just can't pay that money," he said. "Then I'll have to take your house away." "I don't want you to do that either." "Then cut the wire fence," cried Mr. Murphy. "Well, I guess I'll have to do that," said Mr. Hardy, but it was clearly to be seen that he did not want to. He went into the barn and came out wearing a pair of rubber boots and carrying a pair of pincers, the wire cutting things, as Freddie called them. Wading out into the creek, Mr. Hardy snipped the wires of the fence. "There, now you can go on," said he to Mr. Bobbsey, but his tone was not pleasant. "I thought I knew how to make him give in," whispered Mr. Murphy. "Thank you," said Mr. Bobbsey to his friend. They hurried back to the houseboat. "They're going on again!" cried the twins' father. "The fence is down." "Oh, fine!" said Bert. "Now for the waterfall!" sighed Nan, who loved beautiful scenery. "Oh, I've caught a fish!" suddenly shouted Freddie, and he jumped about so that his mother, with a scream, ran toward him, fearing he would go overboard. End of chapter 14.